I used to be an alien. In American legislature, we call undocumented immigrants aliens. And when we use this dehumanizing language to characterize an entire sector of American society, we justify treating them as being inferior or less than human. So in an effort to convince you that we should be treating illegal immigrants more humanely, I could tell you the heartbreaking stories of families escaping violence and oppression to find a safe home for their children in the United States. While these stories are important, they are not enough to change many people's minds about immigration. And it's understandable. It's difficult to sympathize with people whose life experiences are so vastly different from yours. And what do we do when we can't sympathize? We put up a wall. And when we put up a wall, we stop making any effort to try to understand or care about their issues. So let me try to frame the argument in a different way. Instead of thinking about them, I want you to think about yourself and consider how much better off your life is because of undocumented immigrants. And let me explain why. According to Pew Research Center, nearly 5% of the US workforce consists of undocumented immigrants. Nearly a quarter of all workers employed in agriculture are undocumented. Now, these are generally not glamorous jobs. They involve working long hours, performing painful physical labor in the fields, but they are important jobs, and somebody has to do them. And given this statistic, it wouldn't be a stretch for me to say that at least one meal, if not every single meal you have consumed this week, is the byproduct of the labor of an illegal immigrant somewhere in this country. The road that you took to get here today, that was also likely built by many undocumented immigrants. They make up nearly 20% of all workers employed in construction. Other popular occupations for undocumented immigrants include working in childcare as nannies and babysitters, taking care of your children so you can go to work, working in skilled nursing homes as groundskeepers and personal aides, taking care of some of our most vulnerable elderly and disabled citizens. Now, I hope you're seeing a trend with these jobs. They are generally low-paying jobs that require little to no education and are deemed undesirable by most Americans. But they are important jobs. In fact, COVID-19 has really made us rethink what jobs are truly essential in our economy, and overwhelmingly, jobs performed by undocumented immigrants were deemed to be essential. So now that we touched on jobs that undocumented immigrants hold, let's talk about taxes undocumented immigrants pay. According to the Institute on Taxation and Public Policy in Washington, D.C., illegal immigrants pay over $11 billion in taxes every single year. Now, these are tax dollars that go towards programs like Medicare and Medicaid that provide access to affordable health care to countless low-income and elderly Americans. Undocumented immigrants are disqualified from these programs. So that means millions of US citizens would not have access to health care if it wasn't for the taxes undocumented immigrants pay. Now, limited access to health care is one of many obstacles we face. We also struggle with finding housing because most applications require a social security number, and landlords conduct background checks. For the same reasons, undocumented immigrants struggle with finding employment. As an undocumented freshman in college, I discovered we don't qualify for federal financial aid like the Pell Grants. In fact, according to the US Department of Education, as many as 40% of undocumented young adults, ages 18 to 24, don't even have a high school diploma. They have to drop out of school early and take on full-time jobs to support their families. Now, somebody looking at these issues from the outside in could easily just dismiss them and say, well, you are in the country illegally, so you can't possibly expect to have the same inherent privileges that come with being a US citizen. And this is true, but we don't expect to have the same privileges that US citizens have. We simply want to be recognized for all the positive contributions we make to American society and treated with a little bit more human decency. And besides, how many Americans actually understand what the process of immigrating here legally looks like? So let's imagine that you live in a foreign country and you're looking to immigrate to the United States legally. And let's explore what options you have. You could apply for asylum, but in recent years, more than 80% of asylum applications have been rejected. In order for your application to be approved, you need to prove that you are in imminent danger. So it is not enough for you to be gay, living in a country that prosecutes people of your sexual orientation, or for you to be a person of a certain religion, living in a country that heavily discriminates against, brutalizes, and even murders people with your religious beliefs. You need to prove that you are in imminent danger by proving that you're being actively targeted and pursued, whether it's by a gang or by a member of law enforcement. But if you're actively being targeted, do you really have 2, 3, 4 years to wait while your application works itself through the US immigration system? Probably not. Or what if your application gets approved, but the applications of your spouse and children get denied? Are you leaving them behind and moving here by yourself? Probably not. So you tried asylum, but unfortunately it didn't work for you. You could move here legally if you have an immediate family member who is a US citizen, but unfortunately you don't. You could move here legally if you marry a US citizen, but let's face it, there's not a lot of desirable partners for you here. Now, I got my green card through something called VAWA, Violence Against Women Act. It's a piece of legislation passed in the 90s that created a path to legal residency for undocumented women who are victims of domestic violence. While I'm grateful for all the opportunities I have in my life, thanks to the Violence Against Women Act, there's a few glaring issues with this legislation. First of all, as the name implies, only women qualify. So we're assuming that men can't possibly be victims of domestic violence. Secondly, it's a very lengthy and complex process. It involves filing countless documents, writing an exhaustive personal statement, detailing all the hardships you've been through, and attending an interview with an immigration official. Now, I had some advantages in this process. First of all, although I grew up in Russia, I've been speaking English from a young age. I also found a local organization called the Justice and Mercy Legal Aid Clinic that took me on as a pro bono client and assigned me an immigration lawyer. But free legal resources are very scarce, and the demand for them far exceeds the supply. So realistically, you probably don't speak English as well as I do, nor do you have access to a free immigration lawyer. And the chances of you being able to work through this process on your own with no legal counsel is slim to impossible. So now that we've established that undocumented immigrants contribute immensely to the US economy, we also established that immigrating here legally is extremely challenging, if not impossible for some. What can we do? Well, I propose that we stop referring to undocumented immigrants as aliens, and we make a conscious effort to understand the obstacles that they have to overcome. For guidance on how to do this, we can look to other social movements in recent history. In response to police brutality against people of color, we have the Black Lives Matter movement. In response to a rise in Asian hate crimes, we have these Stop Asian Hate rallies occurring all over the country. But when the conversation turns to supporting undocumented immigrants, the room seems to fall silent. Why is that? Why do we not care about the issues undocumented immigrants face in the same way that we care about the obstacles other minorities in this country have to overcome? Well, perhaps it's because undocumented immigrants don't really have a voice. Anytime we speak up about the issues we have to go through, we risk being deported. We risk losing everything we tried so hard to build here. So imagine if you lived in a country where millions of people have passionate debates about whether or not you should have basic human rights and you can't so much as participate in this discussion? How powerless, how small and insignificant would that make you feel? But unfortunately, we don't have a choice. We have to rely on US citizens to fight for us. And as a US citizen, there's a few ways that you can do this. First of all, vote. If not for yourself, then for the millions of people in this country who never have and never will have a right to vote. Secondly, find a nonprofit immigration clinic in your area and donate to them. If you can't donate your time, if you can't donate your money, donate your time, your skills, your expertise. They do a lot of incredible work for immigrants, but they are highly underfunded and understaffed. And lastly, in conversations about immigration with your friends, family members, peers, and colleagues, please remember and please remind them that their lives are better off because of undocumented immigrants. Thank you.